Have you ever, like, really thought about reality itself?
Hmm.
As a philosopher, I mean.
Yeah.
What it actually is.
Oh, absolutely.
Or even nothingness.
Yeah.
What that could even mean.
It's a pretty fundamental question.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's something that a group of Japanese philosophers in the 20th century really grappled with.
They did.
The Kyoto School.
The Kyoto School.
And that's what we're diving into today.
Yeah, fascinating group.
Yeah. And they were kind of coming up right at this time when Japan was really encountering Western thought in a big way.
Yeah, it was the Meiji period.
The Meiji period.
A lot of change happened. Huge change, yeah.
Yeah.
So they were right in the middle of that, trying to figure out, how to make sense of it all.
Absolutely. And one of the key figures in all of this was a philosopher named Nishida Kitaro.
Yoshida Kitaro, yeah.
And he was, so interesting because he was really, really into Western philosophy.
Oh, yeah, he read it all.
He knew it inside and out, but also deeply rooted in Eastern traditions.
Especially Zen Buddhism.
Especially Zen Buddhism, yeah.
And so he kind of brings these two together in a really, really unique way.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the starting point for the Kyoto School.
It is.
And we have some really great sources to work with today.
We do.
To really get into all this.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going to try and do is, really pull out what's important for us as philosophers.
Absolutely.
Thinking about being in nothingness and how these different traditions, Eastern and Western, how they talk to each other.
Yeah.
What kind of dialogue can happen there?
Exactly. I mean, this is a group that really tried to bridge that gap.
They did, yeah.
And they did it in really creative ways.
So it's a deep dive.
It is a deep dive.
It's focused.
Yeah.
And it's all about kind of getting to the heart of what they were doing.
To the heart of it.
So, where should we start? I mean, how do we even define the Kyoto School?
Well, that's a good question.
Because it wasn't like a formal school, right?
Right. It wasn't like Plato's Academy.
Exactly.
They didn't have like a building
No.
or a membership list or anything like that.
Right.
Shida himself, he didn't even really set out to start a school.
No, not in the traditional sense.
Not at all. He was really, really big on encouraging his students to think for themselves.
To develop their own ideas, yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting because it makes it harder to define the school.
It does.
But it also, I think, makes it more dynamic.
It does, yeah.
So more like an evolving network of thinkers.
An intellectual network.
Yeah.
More than a rigid school of thought.
Right.
With like a set of doctrines.
Right, yeah.
But it is interesting that even though it wasn't a formal school, the term Kyoto School actually came from outside the group.
Yeah, that's right. It was actually a critic.
A critic?
Who first used the term Kyoto School?
Who was that?
A guy named Tasaka Jun.
Tosaka Jun.
Yeah, back in 1932.
And he was not a fan.
He was coming from a Marxist perspective,
Fair.
and he basically thought that Nishida Tanabe and Miki Kiyoshi, who were kind of the main figures that he identified with the Kyoto School.
Okay.
He thought that they represented, what he called bourgeois philosophy in Japan.
All right.
So he felt that they weren't really sufficiently engaged with, the material conditions and social action that were so important to him.
So he thought they were a little too abstract.
Yeah.
Out of touch with the real world problems.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is kind of funny.
Yeah.
He himself is now sometimes seen as part of the Kyoto School.
He is, yeah. Sometimes considered part of the left wing of the Kyoto School.
Along with Miki.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like even the critics, they get pulled into this intellectual network.
Exactly. It's a very porous kind of boundary.
It is, yeah. And Fujita Masakatsu points out this really interesting thing.
Yeah.
That Western scholars
Mm-hmm.
have often been way more preoccupied with defining the Kyoto School
Oh, yeah, trying to put a label on it.
than the actual Japanese thinkers themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I kind of get
I understand that.
because, for them it was more about the ideas and the conversation.
It was an organic thing that grew out of their relationships with each other.
Yeah.
Their engagement with the philosophical problems.
Exactly. And Fujita, he actually offers a pretty good working definition.
Okay.
He says that it's, and I'm quoting here, an intellectual network centered on Nishida and Tanabe and mutually formed by those who are directly influenced in both a personal and scholarly manner by them.
That's a good one.
Yeah, thanks.
It captures the reciprocal nature of their influence.
It does.
Yeah.
And the fact that disagreement
Yeah.
didn't exclude you.
Didn't mean you were out of the club.
Exactly. You could still be part of this network.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, the disagreements, like the very famous disagreements between Nishida and Tanabe,
Yeah.
actually highlight
The serious.
how seriously they took each other's ideas.
Exactly.
So it wasn't just like a polite, oh, I disagree with you. It was like, I'm going to really engage with your thought
And push you.
to try to push it further.
Yeah. And I think one source even said that.
Yeah.
Without Tanabe's, really critical engagement with Nishida's work, we might have just ended up with like a bunch of followers.
Like Nishidian philosophy.
Nishidian philosophy, exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of this like vibrant school.
Yeah. Of independent thinkers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one way to define it.
Yeah.
But there's another interesting perspective that comes from Hashi Rishuke.
Okay. Hashi Rishuke.
He questions whether just defining it by connections is enough.
Okay.
He thinks a true philosophical school needs a common possession or formation of a thought.
A shared idea.
A shared idea.
Yeah.
And for him, that idea for the Kyoto school is absolute nothingness.
Okay, so he puts the emphasis on the content.
On the content of
their thought.
Exactly. So he defines it as a group of philosophers spanning several generations
Okay.
who developed their thought in several areas of philosophy with the idea of nothingness as a basis.
So nothingness as kind of the foundational concept.
Yeah, like the bedrock,
Yeah.
the foundation of their thinking.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he does acknowledge the left wing, but he has in the past excluded Miki because of his Marxist orientation.
Yeah.
But even then, he notes the close relationship
Yeah.
between Miki and Nishida.
Yeah. And the influence that Nishida had on Miki's later work.
So it's complex.
It's complex. It's not clean.
It's not cut and dry.
It's messy.
It's messy.
It's a messy network.
It is.
Yeah.
But beyond those definitions, some of the network and the thematic unity,
Right.
there's a couple of other really key characteristics
Okay.
that really kind of define the Kyoto school.
What are those?
And one is their stance towards Western philosophy.
Yeah. How they approached it.
Which is ambivalent.
Ambivalent. Interesting.
It's not a simple embrace or rejection.
Yeah.
It's this critical engagement.
So they were studying it.
Oh, yeah.
They were reading it.
Deeply.
They were wrestling with it.
But they weren't just, taking it wholesale.
No.
They were trying to figure out how to
Integrate it.
integrate it.
With their own, with their own traditions and
Yeah.
develop their own distinctive ideas.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one example of that is this idea of a logic of nothingness.
Okay. Logic of nothingness. Interesting.
Yeah, they were trying to contrast that with, or synthesize it with, I guess,
Yeah.
the Western logic of things.
The logic of things. Yeah.
And what they saw is an Eastern logic of heart-mind.
So bringing those two together.
Yeah, trying to find a way to bring those two modes of thinking together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other thing that's really key is their attitude towards Western modernity itself.
Okay. So modernity being this whole complex of ideas about, progress and rationality, individualism, science, technology, all of that.
Yeah.
And they talked about the need to overcome modernity.
To overcome modernity.
But not by going backwards,
Yeah.
not by just retreating to some, pre-modern way of thinking,
Right.
but by going through it.
Do it.
And beyond it.
Yeah.
And one way they thought about doing that was by really digging deep into East Asian traditions
Yeah.
and seeing what resources they could find there.
Yeah, like re-examining them.
Re-examining them,
Yeah.
reinterpreting them,
Yeah.
and bringing them into dialogue with modernity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this idea of overcoming modernity, it's been really influential,
It has, yeah.
but also controversial.
Controversial, yeah. Especially given its connection to some of their wartime theories.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit later.
We will, yeah.
But
It's a complex legacy.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, James Heisek.
James Heisek.
He offers a kind of simpler definition.
It's a more concise one.
Yeah, he focuses on the three key figures.
The triangle.
The triangle, yeah.
Nishida, Tanabe, and Nishitani.
And those three, plus Ueda Shizutru from a later generation.
Yeah.
They really are kind of the core of what we think of as the Kyoto school.
Yeah, they're the central figures.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that they were part of a much bigger...
Broader intellectual landscape.
Yeah, landscape, yeah.
With other important thinkers.
Some closer in.
Some more central.
Some on the periphery.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a complex network.
It is.
But now let's Let's get into the ideas.
Yeah, let's dive into the philosophy.
And one of the most important ideas
Yeah.
that kind of holds this whole thing together
Yeah.
is this concept of absolute nothingness.
Absolute nothingness.
Or setaimu in Japanese.
That's Sataimu, yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's kind of a head scratcher, right?
It is. It is. Especially for those of us who come from a Western philosophical background.
Yeah.
Where the focus has traditionally been on being.
On being, yeah.
You know, what exists, what is real.
Yeah.
And here we have this idea of nothingness as a kind of absolute principle.
A fundamental principle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a real shift.
And Nishitani, he really makes this point.
He does.
That this concept is what sets them apart from Western philosophy.
Yeah.
Which has historically been grounded in ontology.
Ontology, the study of being.
The study of being, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is important to acknowledge that Western thought hasn't completely ignored this idea.
It hasn't, no. There have been thinkers who have touched on similar ideas.
For instance, Hegel talks about absolute nothingness.
He does.
Yeah.
And then there are the pre-Socratics.
Oh, yeah, like Anaximander.
Right. With his notion of the apeiron.
The apeiron.
Which is, you know, this kind of...
Indefinite.
Unlimited primordial substance.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's Christian negative theology.
Yeah. The mystics.
The
Meister Eckhart.
Who
talked about the nothing.
The nothing, yeah.
As this kind of realm or concept that transcends all categories.
All dualities, all opposition.
Yeah, even our usual understanding of God.
Yeah, so for Eckhart,
yeah,
the nothing was a way to point to the Godhead.
The Godhead, yeah.
Which is beyond the personal God.
Right, beyond all concepts, really. It's that which can't be named.
Yeah.
And Nishida, he actually drew a parallel.
Interesting.
He said that in the consciousness of absolute nothingness, there is neither I nor God.
As distinct entities.
As distinct entities, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very radical kind of non-duality.
It is, yeah. But the nuance here seems really important.
It's crucial.
Because Nishitani and Ueda, they point out that Eckhart's nothingness might still be pointing towards a higher form of being.
Right. It's still kind of within that framework of being and non-being.
Yeah, and they contrast that with the Zen Buddhist understanding.
Okay.
Which is looking for a more radical nothingness.
More radical, okay.
Yeah, one that's not about transcendence, but immanence.
Immanence.
It's found in the present moment.
In the here and now.
Yeah, the immediacy of experience.
Right.
And Hashi.
Hashi, yeah.
He even makes the case that this thinking of nothingness, it's not unique to Eastern thought.
Okay.
He traces it back in Western philosophy.
Interesting, yeah.
To thinkers like Nietzsche.
Yeah.
And Heidegger. But the Kyoto school, they tended to see this Western nothingness as relative.
As relative nothingness, yeah.
As in, it's still kind of defined.
In relation to being.
In relation to being, yeah. It's a negation of being.
Right.
Or maybe even like a veil for being. But not this radical...
Absolute nothingness.
Absolute nothingness.
Yeah, they were interested in.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a real distinction there for them.
Yeah.
Between relative and absolute nothingness.
Yeah. And Nishida himself, he talked about this broad distinction between Western and Eastern logic.
Right, he called it the logic of things versus the logic of the heart-mind.
Logic of things being Western.
Yeah.
Substance. Object. And then the Eastern logic being more about the heart-mind.
Yeah, intuition, feeling.
Yeah. And he thought that this Eastern logic had a lot of potential for a different kind of philosophical development.
Interesting.
Yeah. Even though traditionally it had kind of stayed in the realm of personal experience.
Right, like in religious traditions and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to really understand this concept of absolute nothingness, we need to look at its roots. In Eastern thought. And particularly in
Buddhism. And Taoism. Yeah.
So in Mahayana Buddhism, the central concept is shunyata. Which often translated as emptiness. Or ku in Japanese. And the key here is that true emptiness. It's not just the absence of things. It's not just a void.
It's not a void,
It's more active.
It's active, okay.
Yeah, it's negating this duality.
Between being and nothingness.
Yeah, saying that distinction ultimately doesn't hold up
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not nothingness as opposed to being.
Right.
Nothingness that encompasses being.
Yeah.
Or maybe even goes beyond both of them.
And the Heart Sutra says it really well.
Okay.
I'm going to quote here. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is also form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness.
Wow.
It's kind of a mind bender.
It is, yeah.
But it's pointing to this.
This interdependence.
Yeah.
This non-dual nature of reality.
Yeah, that everything's interconnected.
Yeah, and that you can't really separate things out.
Not ultimately, no.
Ultimately, no.
And it's interesting that even within Buddhism,
yeah,
there's this warning against emptiness sickness.
Emptiness sickness.
Where emptiness itself becomes like a thing.
Okay.
Like a concept you cling to.
Like a new kind of dogma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not what it's about.
No, it's not about that.
It's about this kind of
realization
yeah.
of the true nature of things, which is beyond all concepts,
yeah.
including the concept of emptiness.
Yeah, so it's not nihilism. It's not saying that nothing matters.
It's not about despair.
No.
It's supposed to be a very liberating kind of realization.
Yeah. And it leads to what they call a great affirmation.
A great affirmation.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which is this non-attached understanding of being.
So you can appreciate being.
Yeah.
Without clinging to it.
Without clinging to it, yeah.
Yeah.
And nirvana.
Nirvana.
This is not seen as like
a separate realm.
A separate realm, yeah.
Or annihilation.
Annihilation.
It's a way of being.
In the world.
In the world, yeah.
Here and now.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a transformation of consciousness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's this great phrase.
Yeah.
True emptiness, marvelous being.
True emptiness, marvelous being.
Which I think really captures it.
It does, yeah. It's beautiful.
And Nishitani, in his later work, he actually started using the term emptiness instead of absolute nothingness.
Okay, so he shifted his terminology a bit.
He did.
Interesting.
Yeah. And he was really concerned with this problem of nihilism.
Nihilism, yeah.
In the modern world.
Yeah, the sense of meaninglessness.
Yeah, that everything is pointless.
Yeah.
And he saw emptiness.
Yeah.
Is this absolute negativity.
Absolute negativity. Okay, so it's not just the negation of being. Yeah. It's something that goes even deeper than that.
Yeah, it transcends even the negation of being.
Yeah.
But it doesn't become a separate entity.
Right.
It's still ultimately unified with being.
Yeah.
And he also followed Nishida in thinking about emptiness as a place.
A place, okay.
Or a field.
A field, yeah.
Where beings can appear.
Okay.
In their true nature.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So emptiness is not just an absence.
Oh, no.
It's also a kind of ground.
A ground, yeah.
A possibility for being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's Taoism.
Taoism.
Which also has this idea of a primordial nothingness underlying everything.
Okay.
And the Chinese character for nothingness is Wu.
Wu.
And it has this double meaning.
Okay.
It's both the opposite of being.
Right.
But also the source of
being.
Source.
Okay. Yeah. So it's like this wellspring.
Yeah.
From which everything emerges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Data Jing says, the myriad things under heaven are generated from being. Being is generated from nothingness. Ooh.
So nothingness is the ultimate origin.
Yeah, it's the ground of being.
Yeah.
And it's also described as the Tao.
The Tao, yeah.
Which is this kind of
unnameable.
Yeah, ineffable.
Ineffable principle.
Yeah.
It's the shapeless shape, the image of nothing.
Yeah. And Nishida was really drawn to this idea.
He was, yeah.
He saw it as a way to ground the form of the formless.
The form of the formless.
Yeah. Which is a very paradoxical idea.
It is, yeah.
But it gets at this idea that there's something fundamental.
Yeah.
That underlies all form.
That gives rise to all form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have Zen Buddhism.
Zen Buddhism, yeah.
Which kind of brings together these Buddhist and Taoist ideas of nothingness.
Okay.
And there's this famous Muchon.
The Muchon.
In the Gateless Barrier.
Yeah.
Which is all about this nothingness. But it's not about intellectualizing it.
Okay.
It's not about trying to understand it conceptually.
Right.
It's about experiencing it.
Experiencing it. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's more of a practice than a theory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is the cane that Nishida himself struggled with.
He did, yeah.
For years.
For years.
Yeah.
So it was a very central part of his own philosophical journey.
It was, yeah. And his engagement with Zen was really, really deep.
It was, yeah.
and personal.
Personal, yeah.
He even talked about his impossible desire.
Impossible desire.
To bring Zen and philosophy together.
Mm.
And later Kyoto school thinkers like Nishitani.
Yeah.
Hisamatsu Shinichi.
Hisamatsu Shinichi.
Abe Masao.
Abe Masao.
And Ueda Shizutaru.
Ueda Shizutaru.
They really took that on.
They did.
They were explicitly trying to.
Connect.
Yeah.
Zen practice.
Zen practice.
And philosophical inquiry.
Yeah. But, Nishida wasn't just contrasting Eastern nothingness with Western being. He also developed his own kind of topology.
A topology.
Of absolute nothingness.
Okay.
And he introduced this concept of place.
Place.
Or basho in Japanese.
Yeah.
Expert speaker.